Hey everyone, this is Johnnyonoes, and I'm playing My Summer Car, and in this Let's Learn episode, I'm going to teach you how to put together the initial suspension and body of the car, and then we're going to end with throwing the engine into the subframe. Alright, so there are a lot of different ways to prepare the chassis to start building onto it, but what I like to do is I like to use the floor jack and jack up the front and then work on the back. A lot of people use like the beer bottle, what are those things called? The boxes, the beer bottle boxes. You can use the tractor. The easiest way for me to do it is just to use the floor jack. Now that we got it raised up, let's go ahead and grab ourselves a 10mm spanner. And I think we've already done that. Yep. All right. And grab the subframe. So the subframe is going to be the first one to put on there. As I said, it's a 10mm spanner, and there are 4 bolts to screw in. Next up is the steering rack, which requires a 9mm spanner, and there are 4 bolts. So let's go ahead and pick that guy up. It's right here. Lean on in and put it right on the back of the subframe. Next is the steering column, which requires a 8mm spanner. Let's go ahead and grab that. And there are 2 bolts to put in. So what you want to do is you just want to make sure that it's lined up with the car so that the steering column is right where it needs to go here. Be a little bit tricky to put in, but as long as you're kind of facing it towards the hole in the chassis, you'll be able to connect it. Let's go ahead and screw in the 2 bolts that are connected to the steering rack. Next is the wishbones, are the wishbones. So you start off with a 10mm spanner. So here we go. Let's grab the right one. So this is the front left. It's a 10mm spanner, and each wishbone has 2 bolts to put in. Spindles are up next, and they require a 12mm spanner. Let's grab that, and we'll grab the spindles. That's not a spindle, or the spindles. There we go. This is the front rear, or front right, front rear. The bolt's right on the bottom of it, right like this. Alright, so the next piece is the steering rod. So we're going to take the front left, and what you want to do is you want to make sure that this little, kind of the metal part, is towards the spindle. Try to connect them between the spindle and the steering rack. And the steering rods require a 12mm spanner. We already have. And you just go ahead and spanner this bolt here. Even though it's not really connected to anything yet, you'll be able to connect it to, I think it's the strut that comes out of here. Let's grab the other one. All right, then we're going to put on the disc brakes. And we don't want to tighten them yet until we have the struts and what are those things called? These guys. The half shafts in. Alright. So that's the disc brakes. Now let's get the half shafts on there, and then we can go ahead and tighten all of them together. So this kind of like triangular piece goes inward. The post goes into the disc brake. This is another one of those funny pieces that can connect and be bolted on, even though what it's being bolted onto isn't even there yet. Like, this goes right into the gearbox. So for the half shafts, you need a 9mm spanner. And for the disc brakes, you need a 14. There's only one. You won't be able to connect the half shafts if you have the disc brake already bolted in. Let's go ahead and do the other side. Alright, so next up are the struts. Now the struts have 3 different bolts to put in. So here's the front left. And it can be a little bit difficult to actually get into the car, but just kind of press it. Like, what you're looking for are these holes on the top of the chassis. You want to put the post right through that to get it to initiate. The other thing to be worried about with the struts is the fact that you can't move the car with it. So I kind of shifted the car over to a little bit to the right, so be careful with that. So the first set of nuts to span is number 9. I think we already have 9. And there are 3 of them. These 3, I think, there's 4 of these. They're right on the back of the strut where it connects into the disc brake. Kind of hard to get it to respawn there. Here we go. Alright, the second set of bolts is a 10mm. And those are on the top. Are actually not bolts, they're nuts. There we go. And the last one is the 12 that goes into the steering rod. So if you didn't happen to tighten the steering rods already, this is where you'll connect the steering rod to the strut. So let's go ahead and do the other side. Then the 10s. And then the 9. Alright, the next thing I like to do is put the tires on the front, so that way I don't have to keep this thing jacked up. Let's grab the front right. And the wheels require a 13mm spanner, and there are 4 nuts, or, yeah, nuts on each one. Come on, Johnny, you know what the difference between a bolt and a nut is yet? Jesus Christ. $13. Alright, so let's go ahead and lower the front now that we don't need this jack anymore, and we'll go ahead and do the back. Alright, now that the back is all raised up, let's go ahead and put the trailing arms on there. So this is the rear left-hand side. So let's go ahead and throw that on there. Just want to line this up so that the flat panel is facing to the left. And you'll be able to lock it on right there. And the trailing arms require a 12mm spanner to span in. I don't even know if that's a verb. If that's anyone from the UK or that part of the world, actually all the parts of the world that use the metric system. Is it span or is it wrench? I don't know. I am not a mechanic, as if you've been watching, you know that I have no idea what I'm doing here. All right, next up are the coil springs, and these don't require a spanner or bolts or anything like that. You just throw them right in the middle of the trailing arm, and they'll connect like so. Alright, next up are the shock absorbers. The shock absorbers require 2 different spanners as well, a 12 and a 6, with 3 bolts altogether. This one can be a little bit tricky to get in there, but you're kind of trying to aim for the bottom of it to hit this hole here. I've done this how many times, and it's still difficult. Alright, just like that. Let's connect the other side real quick, then we'll do the wrenching. The 2 6mm bolts are on the bottom. It'd be pretty tricky to see. They're there, right at the bottom. And then the 12 is up in the trunk. Someone needs to shoot those birds, please. Love of Christ. Alright, now we'll do the other side. 12 and then 6. Alright. Second to last bit of things to do in this video is to put down the disc brakes, or the drum wheels. Drum brakes. What am I talking about? Alright. And the drum brakes require a 14mm spanner for the one bolt that they have on there. Let's go ahead and do the rear wheels, which remind you, is the 13mm spanner. This is the right rear. Let's go around the right, Johnny, come on. Okay, now we're ready to mount the engine. Engine's all ready to go. We got the mount going. We got wheels. We are good to go to put the engine inside the car and get ready for the next phase, which is hooking up all the stuff, all the things, the internal stuff. It's actually, the next part's the hardest part. These parts are pretty easy, as well as the last bit, where you're just putting on like the panels and the doors and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and make sure that it's not resting on the side of the chassis. Now we're going to drop this guy right inside. Now what you're going to be aiming for is you want this little panel here to connect to this piece of the subframe. That's what you're going to be aiming for when you drop the engine in. Want to get those as nice and close as possible. Now I know a lot of people actually kind of do without the hoist. Seems like an easy way to do it, but I don't know. It's just that there's a feeling that you get when you're dropping an engine into a car. All right, so as you can see, it's not really that close, but you know that if the bolt appears, that means you're good to go ahead and screw the engine into the frame. So to do that, use a 10mm. Just screw that in, and you'll hear the engine lock into place. And then go ahead and grab the 10mm to get the engine off the hoist. So where is that? There we go. Oh, now we got flies. Alright, look at that. Engine is mounted into the car. And then we can get rid of the hoist altogether, never to be used again. Then go ahead and wrench in the last two bits of the engine. So there's one on the left-hand side, and then there's one behind the engine. You may not be able to see it, but if you just kind of scroll over or mouse over in this area, you'll see it right in the back. Alright, and with that, we are done with this particular episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about My Summer Car, please go ahead and leave your questions in the comments below. Alright folks, this is Johnnyonoes playing My Summer Car. I'll see you all in the next episode. Thanks.